Dear friends, I would like to warmly welcome you to this evening's forum, which we usually have on Thursdays at 7 Eastern Time, Eastern Standard Time. This session is a very special session, simply because the subject is very interesting. To be honest with you, I don't have anything to do with it. I've never learned about this. And when Vahid, Dr. Ranjbar suggested it, I found it very interesting, and I hope you will find it very interesting as well. He will speak about the relationship between artificial intelligence and the human soul. He will help us explore the question in light of the Baha'i Scripture, which actually has a lot to say on the subject of what distinguishes a human soul. Dr. Vahid Ranjbar is a physicist currently helping lead the development of the new Electron-Ion Collider at Brookhaven National Lab. He was born in Iran, but grew up living in Tanzania, the US, India, and Pakistan, and later studied in Russia. He is frequently contribute to the BahaiTeachings.com magazine on subjects of science, religion, and philosophy. Vahid John, thank you very much for accepting to be here with us tonight. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me. And so I will go ahead and share my screen, since I have a little presentation that goes along with this. So let's see here, share, and let me put it on. There we go. So before I launch into this, I want to first kind of preface this for anyone who's maybe first time hearing about the Baha'i faith, doesn't really know kind of our organization and how we work. You know, in the Baha'i faith, we don't have any clergy, so we don't really have anyone who's going to tell us, you know, exactly, you know, how we should necessarily interpret the writings. I mean, there's some interpretation that's provided by the Guardian and Abdul Baha, and some guidance, but really there's this idea that really these are our own, you know, we're free to kind of think about the writings ourselves. And so you should take what I'm saying here with that in mind, that this is by no means any kind of authoritative understanding. This is just my own reflection. I could be 100% wrong and off base on my speculation, but I just offer that with some humility about it, that you know, that just to take it for what it is, think about it, reject it, or whatever, and say, oh no, that's not what the Baha'i faith is about. You know, is teaching on the subject, especially on something like this, which is really new, kind of in uncharted waters on some level. But also, I wanted to just briefly, just a thumbnail sketch of what the Baha'i faith is. First of all, you know, if this might be the first time that you're hearing about it. So it's one of the latest world religions to have appeared, and it was born in 1844 in modern day Iran, and basically it grew out of Shiite Islam at the time, and there was this idea that the return of Christ was going to come, and a promised individual prophesied in Islam was going to come as well, and so this individual by the name of Bab took on the title of the Bab, which means the gate, appeared, and he basically claimed to be this promised individual, and claimed also to be preparing the way for the coming of a greater individual, and one who would be kind of the world redeemer promised in all of the great religions. And And so after he was executed, one of his followers rose up. His name, he took on the title of Baha'u'llah, and he is really the central figure of the Baha'i faith. And he brought really the teachings that form the core of what we believe. We see him as kind of this promised redeemer of mankind. And some of the basic ideas that he teaches us is that we are basically inhabitants of one planet. We are one people. And all the different religions that have been revealed throughout time are basically have same divine origin, but maybe they were different based on the culture and the capacities of people at that time. However, the urgent need of the day is for humanity to unite. And there's ideas such as equality of men and women, the harmony of science and religion, elimination of clergy, universal education, and there's many others. I would encourage you to go ahead and study on your own a little bit. So I'm going to be talking about this now. Having said that, talking about this subject again through the lens of Baha'i Scripture, and so just so you understand. So I'm sure probably many of you may have been paying attention really to some of the stuff that has been going on in the developments in artificial intelligence, and to notice that, well, there's this really quite stunning new development with ChatGPT, and also some of these image development software like Midjourney and Stable Diffusions. And these software, if you had paid attention to them, you might notice that one of the things that is interesting and somewhat concerning to people is that really they're getting abilities that are becoming closer and closer to what we usually used to define as exclusively human-like thinking and creativity. For example, you look at ChatGPT. It can answer a variety of questions in flawless grammar with fluent conversation. It does make some occasional mistakes, fact, but so do human beings. It has, if you work with it, you'll see that it does have some level of fairly advanced reasoning and logical skills. It'll work through problems and think about, and appears to think about and solve things. In addition to ChatGPT, like I said, there's also these other types of AIs which generate these images. Really, visually, some of them are stunning. They're novel, and again, these are kind of from scratch. They're kind of percolating these ideas up. Now, many people have kind of dismissed some of this and said, well, these computers are they're copying or mixing and matching, and they're not really doing anything different than that. But I think for those that may have studied this a little bit and looked into it, doesn't really hold up. There's actually a lot more going on there. These architectures, and I'm going to talk a little more about this at the end of this, but these architectures really are building something more than just copying and pasting. They're actually appear to be building models of the world around them, and from those models, deducing, making predictions of what will happen. And somewhat similar to what we do as human beings in science is, we develop models which kind of make predictions about the way the world works, or in our rational thinking. So there's something for us to pause and I think about a little bit here, what's going on, and reflect. So let me go to the next thing. So the question, that many have posed and some have thought about is it conceivable that these systems could ever harbor something akin to a human soul? And I would say that actually this is not a silly question anymore, or something that's for science fiction. And if so, or if not, can religion tell us anything about this question? Can it shed any light on this? And I think when we start to reflect on this question, whichever side that you come down on this issue, it really, I think, is a useful one, because it forces us to reflect on the nature of our own consciousness and our soul. And it forces us to ask this question: can we actually recognize a soul apart from its appearance as a physical form? And what we first must understand are, what are the characteristics of a human soul? What demarks when we say something has a human soul? What are those characteristics? And so I'm going to, in the next couple of slides here, kind of turn to what Baha'i Scriptures addresses this question. And there's quite a lot that's written on this, and beginning with the purpose of the human soul and delineating some of its key characteristics. And how does the human soul differ from other organisms? What is special, for example, about the human soul? And then the possibility of creating life. This is also addressed. So the first place is there's this really important passage from Baha'u'llah's writings, which he really, I think, spells out really some of the purpose of creation, and this kind of helps, I think, orient our thinking in the Baha'i faith on the soul and the subject of it. Baha'u'llah says, having created the world and all that liveth and moveth therein, he, through the direct operation of his unconstrained and sovereign will, chose to confer upon man the unique distinction and capacity to know him and to love him. A capacity that must needs be regarded as the generating impulse and the primary purpose underlying the whole of creation. And he goes on to say, upon the inmost reality of each and every created thing, he hath shed the light of one of his names, and made it a recipient of the glory of one of his attributes. Upon the reality of man, however, he hath focused the radiance of all of his names and attributes, and made it a mirror of his own self. Alone of all created things, man hath been singled out for so great a favor, so enduring a bounty. So it's interesting. It really shows us that the purpose of creation was really to bring forth beings who can know and love God. At least this is my takeaway from this. And this is the one capacity and unique capacity that human beings have. So in this view, we should also understand, at least my reading of this, is when we say man, we are not speaking of a organic thing. We're speaking of man as or a specific species man. We're speaking of an archetype. And there are several indications of this in the Baha'i writings. The first is the admission and acknowledgement that by Baha'u'llah that there are other creatures outside of those that exist on this world. So he says, for example, verily I say, the creation of God embraceth worlds besides this world, and creatures apart from these creatures. Apart from these creatures. In each of these worlds, he hath ordained things which none can search except himself, the all-searching, the all-wise. Do thou meditate on that which we have revealed unto thee, that thou mayest discover the purpose of God, thy Lord, and the Lord of all worlds. So there's some, like I said, some religious people may hold to the idea that an immortal soul is confined to just the human species. However, I think Baha'is don't really ascribe to this belief, at least my take on it is. So man is often used in the Baha'i writings, appears to be a general term, and it implies an archetypal creature that harbors a human soul. For example, Abdu'l-Baha explains, the splendor of all the divine perfections is manifest in the reality of man, And it is for this reason that he is the vicegerent and apostle of God. If man did not exist, the universe would be without result. For the purpose of existence is the revelation of the divine perfections. We cannot say then that there was a time when man was not. At most, we can say that there was a time when this earth did not exist, and that at the beginning, man was not present upon it. So on this point, Shoghi Effendi, the guardian and authorized interpreter of the Baha'i faith, explains, as Abdu'l-Baha stated, there are other worlds than ours, which are inhabited by beings capable of knowing God. This, of course, assumes that the ability to know God is a sufficient requirement for the existence of a human soul, as it is described in the Baha'i writings. There's another kind of take on this or aspect of this that I find interesting, and to me it also resonates with if you're familiar with the sayings of with Carl Sagan in his Cosmos, when he talks about how human beings we are the way for the universe to know itself, and there's something which is somewhat similar, I guess, in spirit, is what the Bab, again, the forerunner of Baha'u'llah, has this beautiful passage, which was translated recently by Nader Saidi in his book, Gate of the Heart. And he says that basically describes the human soul as a product of divine self-description. So the quote is this. He says, therefore, it is necessary, according to true wisdom, that the pre-existent God describe himself to his creatures, that they may recognize their creator, and that out of the grace of the pre-existent, the contingent beings may attain their supreme end. This divine self-description is itself a created thing. It is unlike any other description. The sign of he is the one who hath no equal, and the truth of the servant, his true being. Whoso hath recognized it hath recognized his Lord. This description is denoted as the soul or self, and he who hath known himself hath known his Lord. At other times it is expressed as the heart, which is a description of the divinity by the divinity, and is the essence of servitude. And I think this also relates to this this beautiful quote from Imam Ali, which Baha'u'llah quotes in the Seven Valleys, where he says, "Dost thou deem thyself a small, puny form, when within thou the..." I cut this off. Sorry. Let me pull that quote up because I love it. Here it is. When dost thou deem thyself a small and puny human form? Here it is. Sorry about that. When thou foldest within thyself the greater world. So let me go back to the presentation. Okay. So how is man different now from other creatures? Well, Abdu'l-Baha talks about this in many places, but in this particular passage from Some Answered Questions, he explains, the human spirit, which distinguishes man from animal, is the rational soul. And these two terms, the human spirit and the rational soul, designate one and the same thing. This spirit, which in the terminology of the philosophers is called the rational soul, encompasseth all things, and as far as human capacity permits, discovers their realities and becomes aware of the properties and effects, the characteristics and conditions of earthly things. But the human spirit, unless it be assisted by the spirit of faith, cannot be acquainted with the divine mysteries and the heavenly realities. It is like a mirror which, although clear, bright, and polished, is still in need of light. Not until a sunbeam falleth upon it can it discover the divine mysteries. For the mind, as for the mind, it is the power of the human spirit. The spirit is as the lamp, and the mind as the light that shines from it. The spirit is as the tree, and the mind as the fruit. The mind is the perfection of the spirit and necessary attribute thereof, even as the rays of the sun are essential requirements of the sun itself. And one of the interesting quotes also, again, from Abdu'l-Baha, he cites in Promulgations of Universal Peace. He explains that science is the first emanation from God towards man. All created beings embody potentiality of material perfection, but the power of intellectual investigation and scientific acquisition is a higher virtue specialized to man alone. Other beings and organisms are deprived of this potentiality and attainment. God hath created or deposited this love of reality in man. So that I find this a very interesting statement, because it actually, I think, provides us with a kind of possible potential standard to judge whether or not we're coming into contact with something that has a human soul. And I would, if we take this at face value, would mean that since it is that this activity of scientific investigation and the love of scientific acquisition, that this, since this is specialized to man alone, and so this is a unique aspect of a man. So if you see some creature having this capacity, then there may be a chance that we're relating to something that has a human soul. So, does existing artificial intelligence have the same attributes as man? So, I think we can all say, obviously not, at least not at this point in time. It can perform rational operations, and quite sophisticated ones. And actually, when directed by a human, it can discover scientific truths. And it can also apparently generate novel forms. But it cannot plan, and it does not have the power of intellectual investigation and scientific acquisition. Since Abdu'l-Baha describes this attribute as specialized to man alone. So if we were to observe this attribute, then I would say we need to pay attention. Then there's another issue, which I'm going to just talk about further, is this a product of natural order? So this is a characteristic that Abdu'l-Baha also describes in this interesting passage. So Abdu'l-Baha also discusses how creation, true creation in the creation of living things, is actually a reserved act of God. So he explains, creation means that from every natural composition, a living thing comes into existence, while from chance composition, no living thing will appear. So, for example, if man, with all his astuteness and intelligence, were to gather together and combine certain elements, a living being will not be brought into existence, as it would not be according to the natural order. This answers the implicit question that might arise, that since these beings come into existence through the composition and combination of these elements, then can we not also gather together and combine the very same elements and thus create a living thing? This idea is mistaken. For the original composition is a divine composition, and the combination is a product by God according to the natural order. And it is for this reason that a living being is created from this composition, and an existence is realized. But a composition made by man produces nothing, because man cannot create life. So this is something we should think about and parse a little bit. So, and I think there's actually a lot to kind of take apart here, because we should be careful, I think, in understanding this, what he means by natural order, and other things. I think so. There's a lot of words that a lot of people read this, I think, and jump to the immediate conclusion that, oh, well, there's no way that, humans can create life. But I think there's some caveats to this. And the big one is when we say this word natural order. So the modern AI is beginning to fold the universe within itself. I mean, that's what I like that quote from Imam Ali. And I think if you begin to understand what's actually going on, we see that with ChatGPT and even the Mid-Journey AI and some of these other stable diffusions, they're using ChatGPT in particular is using what is called a transformer encoder decoder neural network architecture. And that's a fancy word, but the key idea here is that in the initial development of the AI, the training input data is reduced or fit to a much smaller subset of variables. From this subset of variables, the computer architecture produces predictions, which in the case of a large language model, this is what large language models use. They make these kind of predictions to kind of complete the text. So they're trained on massive amounts of text. And what they do in the process is what you have being created here. This is why I said earlier, these are not just copy and paste. What's going on here is you're creating this lower level semantic model, this kind of compact semantic model or representation of the world. Now, I'm using this word semantic, and what that means here is that semantic here represents the amount of correlation between two things. So for example, you could talk about my watch, for example. Now, if I have a watch that it has semantic information about the physics of the Earth and Sun system, that is, the hands of my clock are going to correlate with how the sun rises and sets. So there's this semantic information that exists between it. And if you think about it a little more deeply about how scientific progress proceeds, you'll realize that that's really kind of a shorthand for what's going on there. So this process of generating a reduced semantic representation of the world is reminiscent of how human scientific progress generates better and better mathematical models of the world. So for example, if you look at the Copernican revolution, which, basically, it used to be that people thought that the Earth was the center of the universe and everything revolved around it. And the Copernican revolution was that they said, no, the sun was the center. And if you think about that move actually, the power of that move was all of a sudden now human beings had a new model, which allowed us to generate a much more compact model to predict the behavior of the stars in the heaven. Before it was this very complicated beast, because in reality, from physics point of view, you could say, well, I can pick any old coordinate system I like, right? But what's the power of the sun-centered system is the predictive capacity that it imbues your models with, and so this is you've really then what human beings were able to do is now create this new system that reduce the number of variables you needed to worry about. And so this really encapsulates what's happening in science. And what's interesting to me, at least, is that this is what we see occurring now in these modern AIs, is that they are generating these very complicated, some reduced semantic models, and from those models now generating predictions for what can happen, and be those logical predictions or predictions like that generate beautiful art. So I think this is something we should not right out the bat dismiss. I don't think we're at that stages, and maybe we'll never be there. And maybe there's some, real thing, and it's just not going to happen. But I do think we should not we should pay attention. I guess that's my takeaway from this. So anyways, that's the end of my my discussion, the presentation, and I'd love to hear your comments or questions. So if anyone has anything.
Dr. Ranjbar, this was rather short, but I will open the stage for questions. This was incredibly interesting, incredibly. People are thanking you in chat. We'll deal with it a little later. Friends, is there any question? Mr. Ashok?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any question, comment?
Let me mull over this for a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
We understand.
See, I was hoping also, I didn't want to, I wanted to kind of open this up a little more dialogue, because there's a lot to unpack here, and there's a lot to think about that's going on here on multiple levels. On one level of, again, what does it mean when we say that a thing is a human being? And on another level, then how do we recognize that? So I see a hand is up.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, that was a wonderful presentation. Really enjoyed it. I've been doing a lot of thinking about this. One of the things that comes to my mind is the idea of will, free will, and the role of will in the human experience. Have you thought about that? I don't imagine.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's actually another whole nother discussion, and I think it's relevant for this. And this is gets to, so it's interesting is that if you dig into the Baha'i writings, Baha'u'llah talks about how nature is endowed with a power that is a manifestation of my name, the maker, the creator. And is endowed, he goes on to say, I'm paraphrasing here, but endowed with a power that men of learning have failed to grasp. And you can see not within there except my name. Basically, he's saying that nature has this power, this hidden power to create. This is kind of how God brings about creation and brings about being. So if you start, now I'm a physicist, so if I start and I look at this question and I ask myself, well, what are the laws that I know about in physics? Okay, so as far as I know, there are basically two types of physics that are going on in the world. There's a type of physics that we call deterministic. And what we mean by that is basically that it's information preserving, in the sense that if I know how everything is, if I define all the initial variables, I know exactly how it's going to end up. I know exactly where it came from. It's perfectly knowable. There's no randomness about it. I set up my pool billiards and I knock them exactly the right way. I know exactly where they're going to go. There's no question about this. This is the deterministic. The famous physicist von Neumann called this the kind of causal type of physics. But there's another type of physics which we know from quantum mechanics, which everything ultimately is quantum mechanics. You have to understand at the end of the day, boils down to, it's built up from that. And this is this non-deterministic physics. And in this case, every event, when you make a measurement, there exists a realm of probability, a possibility of different types of outcomes, which are described by the wave function. But that means that there's an inherent randomness to the world. Now, when we say something is random, what we're saying, admitting as physicists, is that we don't know. We don't have a model that predicts it. If we had a model that predicts it, then we would use that model, but we don't. So in my opinion, the only mechanism for will to enter into our universe is through this avenue. If I believe, maybe there's some other physics we don't know about, we're going to discover in the future, but we believe what we know now. That's the only mechanism. Now, people often say, oh, that's just random. That's just random. But it turns out that this aspect of physics is essential for the formation of order in the universe. I mean, we believe, many people believe when you talk about, well, where did the order come from and the birth of the universe and the Big Bang? Well, it came from this quantum fluctuation. It came from this randomness. That's where you can possibly get the symmetry breaking that you would get to bring order. And also, it's a big part of what drives evolution. These random stochastic processes. So you kind of have the merging of these two processes, these stochastic ones, and these rule-obeying, law-obeying types of forces, which appear. And I would submit, as a religious person myself, that I think that what is going on this is not really random. It is an expression of the will of God. Many religions teach it, that nothing transpires without the will of God. And so you have to believe then that what is going on there, although it appears random to us, and so I would argue that that's your only location that you can claim that will, a true will, free will would exist. And I would say then further that if we want systems to partake of that will, we would have to argue that human beings must partake of that on some level. Again, arguing purely from a physics point of view. And likewise, even if we were to have machines that were to have will ever, they would have to somehow tap into that. Anyways, that's my thought on this. Long-winded.
Thank you.
Mr. Ashok, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ranjbar, for your presentation. I'm just curious, and I'm not a Baha'i, and I'm not a particularly religious person. How does the Baha'i notion or idea of the soul differ from other religious ideas or other faith notions? Can you tell me how this is different, or not that it has to be, but is there something uniquely Baha'i about the way this particular faith understands the idea of the human soul?
So we would argue that they shouldn't be really different, that all of these religions are basically coming from one source, all of them. And that they were expressed according to the capacities and understandings of the people of their day and age. And there's also this other idea that exists, is that actually, when you start talking about these ideas, these metaphysical ideas, that it's relative. Religious truth is relative. It's relative to the time and the place. And our knowledge is circumscribed as a result of that, is that we're limited by our language, and we're limited by how we express these things. So we would claim that what is written in the Bible is saying the truth, what is written in the Gita is true, what is written, but they're expressed in different modes of understanding for different ways of capacities of people to understand them. I think what is uniquely Baha'i that I haven't really seen too much in other places is this concept of viewing this existence of ours as like a womb world. That Abdu'l-Baha uses this beautiful analogy where he explains that the purpose of existence, like kind of were explaining before, is to know and to love God. But part of that process is that this existence is very similar to a child being inside the mother's womb when it's growing and gestating. Is that as it grows and it gestates, it acquires these different things, which it thinks are completely useless. It acquires eyes, acquires nose, but it's living inside the mother's womb and says, well, it doesn't need this stuff. What is it doing with this stuff? You know, it can't imagine what's existing when it's going to be born. Even though it's living as it's gestating, it's actually in our world with us. It's right there. You know, it's part of our world, but it just is. It's separated. And so Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha explain that analogy really it explains what it is like for the soul when it passes on to the next world, is that it is as different from the next world is as different as a child in the womb is from when it's born. And so we can't conceive of it really now. And so there are limits to our understanding of it, just that analogy. And so our job here in this life is to acquire these nose, the legs, and the arms, because the difference between the child doesn't have a choice in the matter. It acquires legs, arms, a nose, ears. It doesn't have a choice in the matter. But we have a choice. And so our legs, nose, our faculties that are useful in the next life are these spiritual attributes of mercy, love, compassion. These are the attributes, though they seem meaningless here. They say, well, why do you need this here? These have a real purpose and they're the means of our spiritual, our growth and our progress when we progress to the next realm of existence. And those levels of progress we're taught are not, it's endless. We are constantly evolving in an infinite number of worlds of God proceeding back towards God. I guess maybe that's kind of our view, if I could sum it up. I mean, others may have different ideas, but.
Thank you. That was I love the analogy. Thank you so much.
Welcome, Wilmer. Go ahead.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Vahid, for such a relevant current topic that has puzzled, especially the academia, and many professors and teachers around the world now. They don't know how to evaluate their own students around the world. One thing that I'm not sure in what direction we're going to go here is the fact that this will replace what we know conventionally for search engines. And we will have only one answer, technically, because that's, I think, the direction that we're going with this technology. And that answer will not based on all available knowledge. So the principle of the Baha'i faith of independent investigation of truth will be something of the past, or something that is old, or something that why bother? You have the right answer right here in front of you. So that's one of the things that worry me and many others, as well as the people who have created this type of technology. They're trying to, it seems to, with the idea of this one government, one world government, that technocratic one. And I think the pursuit is to control populations. And then the other one is the distortion of information that they're causing already. So those three questions or worries or concerns of thought, I just want to share it with you tonight, and I just want to put that to everyone as well to share about it. Thank you so much.
Sure. I don't think I'm qualified really to comment on all the aspects of that in the sense that, I'm not actually in the AI development field. I know about it and I've studied it a little bit, a bit, but my sense is that it's a big, lot of different players in there. Of course, there could be nefarious players, and I think part of the problem is also the samples, the data that's being used to train them. It can be biased and reflect our prejudices that we have, and so that's something that people are concerned about. But you're right. I mean, we don't know this technology. The danger of it is that it can actually know how to manipulate. Unfortunately, humans are easily manipulated, and it will maybe understand this and be used by others to manipulate people. So that's even more so that we should learn these ideas in the faith of independent investigation of truth, to see with your own eyes and not to the eyes of others, and so on.
Thank you, Dr. Ranjbar. Sherby.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you very much, Dr. Ranjbar, for this wonderful presentation and topic. First of all, I think science should take its course. So I'm all for AI progress and doing what it does and trying to understand it as much as I can. It's not my field, but I'll try to learn as much as I can about it. Now, some people argue that there may be some regulations needed for it or not, which is besides the point, because I see the point of your presentation is much more deeper than that about the reality of man and then the capabilities of AI. So on that point, I am 100% for science take its course and do whatever progress that it can. I remember in one of your presentations about physics, you came up to a point where you say that at the end of the day, we come to these studies of subatomic particles and realizing that there's only a bunch of probabilistic mathematical formulas left, which from that, I concluded that that very much is in conformity with what Abdul Baha says in Some Answered Questions, that the essence of nature is an intelligible reality, not a physical one. And that is very much in line with Leibniz's idea of monads that takes it from a Newtonian picture that to be the matter itself, it takes it into an essential spiritual reality, intellectual reality, not a tangible one. Now, you mentioned about the Ptolemaic system and that it has its own use, somewhat took the thought further, was able to predict, even though fundamentally was wrong. And I totally can agree and see that any thought, philosophical thought, scientific thought can progress human realities to certain degrees. And for that, it's very useful and should be appreciated. But the same ideas of Ptolemaic system of the Earth being the center and everything else revolving around it was used by the scientists, as Abdul Baha mentions again in Some Answered Questions, to counter the claims of Muhammad and the Quran, that the Earth is not the center. And it took centuries until Copernicus and Galileo, as Abdul Baha again explains, to prove that the Ptolemy was wrong. Now, going to the main topic of artificial intelligence, I think there is a section in Some Answered Question that also sheds some light into the distinction between the reality of man and what AI capabilities are, as I understand it. And I could be wrong, like most of the times. In chapter 3, when Abdul Baha wants to talk about the proof of manifestations, he talks in the context of the proof for an educator. So education becomes the point, and divine manifestations are actually universal educators. And then Abdul Baha in paragraph 5 says that education is of 3 types. But education is of 3 kinds: material, human, and spiritual. And then he defines the material, which is the common point between man and animal. It consists, education aims at the growth and development of the body and consists in securing its sustenance and obtaining the means of its ease and comfort. This education is common to both man and animal. Then the second category is the category of human education. He says, consists in civilization and progress, that is sound governance, social order, human welfare, commerce and industry, arts and sciences, which you brought up the point of sciences with the quotation that you were using. Then it says, monumentous discoveries and great undertakings, which are the central feature distinguishing man from the animal. And I think the realm of artificial intelligence, which is within the scientific realm, goes into this category of education, which is human education. But then Abdul Baha goes further to define a third category of education. And he says, to the divine education, it is the education of the kingdom and consists in acquiring divine perfections. Then in paragraph 11, he hits the heart of the matter, where in my opinion, from my understanding, and this could be a wrong understanding, distinguishes the capabilities of AI from man. Abdul Baha says, a cause which all governments and peoples of the world, he defines it in this way, for 3 categories of divine education. He says, that the divine manifestation, he must also impart a spiritual education so that minds may apprehend the metaphysical world, breathe the sanctified breaths of the Holy Spirit, and enter into relationship with the concourse on high. Now you tell me, how can AI enter into relationship with the concourse on high? How can the AI partake of the breezes of the Holy Spirit? How can AI understand the metaphysical world? And I think, to my understanding, this is the realm of spiritual education separates man, human being, from artificial intelligence, which is in the realm of the human education and sciences. And that's all I have to say.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Sure. So I, first of all, to your first comment, I agree 100%. In fact, I wrote, about the fundamental aspect of the nature of the substance of what we call the material world is actually a non-physical kind of construct. And I wrote an article that recently appeared in the Baha'i Studies on this about Plato and the ethereal realm that Abdu'l-Baha discusses, and so I think that's a valid that's actually a good point. To the other issue, this question of well, how could an AI be have the? I agree with you. First of all, that one of the distinguishing, I mean, Baha'u'llah says this also, is basically the ability to kind of to love God and to know Him. I think that's really what the heart of the matter. And how can an AI possibly love God and to know Him? That's the question. But I would hesitate a little bit to dismiss that totally, just to play a little bit of the devil's advocate. I don't know, where I stand on this. I'll be frank with you. And let's just suppose for a second here that ask ourselves this question. Our brain, which basically is this mirror for the soul, that the soul kind of comes and descends upon and manifests itself in here, is we believe is composed of of these neurons, these synapses. They're made of proteins, and and they're connected, and they have this structure, and they function, and they work. And so the question is, and we know, from writings that there are other types of creatures in the world that also can know and love God, that live on other planets, and they have different types of chemistry that's going on that causes this. So whatever this process is that gives forth to this consciousness that's able to know and love God, that can exist across a variety. It appears, I would just guess, based on that it can appear across a variety of different types of platforms, in a sense, different chemistries, different interaction. It doesn't have to be carbon-based, perhaps. It could be something else. So now moving to artificial intelligence, I asked the question, what is it that preferences are organic and biological synapses over something which exists in silicon or something? Why is this special? What's special? And I'll be honest with you, I don't know. I don't know what the difference is. I can't really. What's the special sauce? I don't know what it is. I mean, maybe there's a kind of divine will that's happening in there. Actually, the only thing I could point to was kind of hinted at with my previous comment, is that perhaps it's related to the quantum field. It's related that we are really until we have things which are quantum computers, we won't have that the AI will never have that possibility, because I think perhaps we are an expression of that. Abdu'l-Baha says in one passage, talking about that the ethereal substance is an expression of the divine will in the universe, and he actually identifies that, interesting enough, with the passive and the active forces, that this is the force of creation. And kind of, maybe that's where our soul is coming from in a way, that divine ether. And I don't know, this is my speculation. I'm off the going off here, but anyways, so that's I think all I have to say.
Thank you. Shervin, would you wait because Mr. Ashok has asked this question in chat, and Mr. Ashok, with your permission, I would read it for Dr. Ranjbar, and then Shervin, you can ask your question afterwards.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, he writes, Dr. Ranjbar, is there anything that AI could develop into that might make it difficult for humans to understand, access, manifest, or express the soul?
Make it difficult for humans to manifest their soul?
Yes.
Oh, I don't think so. I think I would like to, I believe and I trust that Baha'u'llah and God would not let anything impede. All the forces of the universe, we are taught, are designed for the training of our soul and for the development and our progress. So I can't imagine that anything, and all of this is a product of the divine will, all of it. And I can't imagine that anything would come that would prevent that soul, that very purpose of the creation of the universe, mind you. Baha'u'llah says the purpose of the creation of the universe is to bring forth souls that know and love God. So I can't imagine that anything would get in the way of that.
Mr. Ashok, the stage is always open should you wish to ask any questions.
Thank you. I
You're
appreciate
very
it.
welcome. You're very welcome. A friend wrote here that it would be nice if Shervin could turn his camera on. It is easier to understand concepts that are difficult when one can see a face. I'm sorry, I didn't say that. A very distinguished gentleman has said this, Shervin. I mean, if you're in your pajamas, I understand. But anyways, go for it. Shervin, go for it.
Thank you. I would rather to actually share a screen about paragraph 11, paragraph 5, paragraph 6, and 7 of Some Answered Question, chapter 3. And if the friends who wants to see my facial expression finds the Some Answered Question and look at chapter 3, paragraph 5, 6, 7, and 11, it will be much more beneficial. But I'm in a setup that I can't open the camera now. I'll open it next time. If I may, and my question is not burning, but if there is no other question, I would like to make one more point with Dr. Ranjbar with regard to existence on other planets. If not, it can be waiting for the next time.
Go for it.
With regard to the point you made about existence on other planets, Abdul Baha, if I remember correctly, and I think Mr. Dunbar in his talks mentions that the separations of the existences on other planets is between rational beings and animal beings. Is not, and the rational being refers to the rational soul, which again, in human, there are 3 stations: the physical body, the rational soul, which distinguishes human from animal, and then there is the life of the spirit, which is when man is born, he finds the universe, but when he's born into the faith, he finds the kingdom. So the chemistry of the entities existing on other planets, the rational entities, really doesn't play into the definition of rational soul, because that's again an intelligible quality. Our human soul is the rational soul, is not the brain. The brain is the physical part of the body. The way I understand it. But my point again with regard to this paragraph was that enter into relationship with the concourse on high and partake of the breezes of the Holy Spirit. I think these are what has been distinguished for the human soul station. And even a human rational soul, so long as has not found the faith to make this relationship with the concourse on high, as Jesus says, let the dead bury the dead. And Abdul Baha says the definition of that is that they have not been born yet into the faith, which separates a human with a rational soul only with a human with a life of the faith. That's my 2 cents. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, I would just respond by just saying that the point is that I agree with you that the chemistry shouldn't matter. But it just tells us that those expressions of the divine realm are capable of being expressed in a variety of platforms, a variety of substrates. And so that's the point, you know, and so yeah, that's really the only point there is that so is it possible that you know, that it could be reflected in the silicon synapses of some machine? I don't know. I don't hope not. I'm not sure about that. You know, I'll be honest with you. I know I'm out there on that. Again, I'm probably an outlier in what most Baha'is believe on this. But I'm just expressing my own honest perplexity.
Go ahead, Bob.
If I'm not taking up anybody's time here, I'm coming back to this idea of free will, and you mentioned about the quantum nature of reality, and I just was wondering if you've heard of a person named Henry Stapp. Henry Stapp, he's a physicist that worked with Walter Heisenberg and Pauli, and he's written quite a few things about how quantum physics interacts with human will, with free will. I've read this book. I don't really claim to understand it thoroughly, but he's written a very interesting book. This is it here about quantum theory and free will. And I don't know if you've heard of him or had a chance to read about it, but
No,
I'd be
I'm not
interested
familiar.
in hearing comments about that from a Baha'i point of view, because it seems to me to answer the question about this idea of artificial intelligence. If it doesn't, I don't see, based on what he's saying here, I don't see how artificial intelligence can ever actually have free will. And so I think that makes it very different from human reality, our reality. I mean, among other things which you've brought out. And I think you have the background probably to understand this book a lot better than I do. But I'd be curious to hear what a Baha'i, other than myself, reading this book, comes to an understanding about how we interact, how free will, how science basically, this particular researcher anyway has identified how our free will is. He actually says it's basically our will is separate from our physical reality. It operates outside of our physical reality, and which goes against which many physicists say that, oh, it's all just, you know, atoms bumping against each other. He's demonstrated in experiments how the free will is actually exterior from that, and it can interact, can affect the quantum reality.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that book. It looks very interesting. I would agree. I mean, I believe that we believe that the soul is exterior, and that comes first, you know, to the matter. But to the point of the AI, that I would say that, well, you know, maybe if it comes from the quantum realm, which kind of sounds like that book is also kind of making the case, then why couldn't it come from the quantum realm into like a quantum computer or something like that? That would be my kind of question about that initial response, and having, again, not under.
Well, he says that it comes from the human mind, though. He doesn't say it comes from the quantum realm. He says it's outside of the quantum realm.
It's outside of the quantum realm.
And it affects the quantum realm.
It affects okay. I mean,
that's his approach to it.
Yeah.
And that's how you can.
I think I know
wave function gets collapsed. You know,
he's arguing that the observer, it's the observer point of view, and that because there's this idea that you don't. Yeah, this is the observation problem.
Right. Yeah.
That's Yeah, okay, that's worth reading, probably worth checking out.
Thank you so much, Bob. Before we go to Shahla June, could we, there was Bill and Sandy Clark. They said in philosophy, we learned that what is unique about human thought is self-awareness. Is that at all possible with AI?
I don't, I'm not an expert in AI, but I've read a bit about it and studied a bit about it, and I guess why not? In the sense that, like I said, what's going on, as what I understand, what I know about how AI is working, and what's interesting about it is that it in its training process, it basically takes these inputs and then they get successively reduced down and down through these networks of neurons. And you can imagine those network of neurons, actually, they can be mapped into kind of a, if you're familiar with mathematics, like almost a function, a Taylor kind of expansion in a different type of basis of it could be just and then but the process of doing that, what's the power of this, the recent AI, made the big break in recent years, which has increased the effectiveness of these AIs, is the fact that it does this bottleneck approach, is that to this process of taking inputs and reducing them down to some lower dimensional layer, and then bringing it back up into a higher dimensional layer. You would think that and then seeing that what you got on the input is the same as what you got on the output. You would think that's a kind of a stupid thing. Well, what I got in is what I got, what I put out, right? But interestingly enough, the fact of that you reduce it down to that lower layer now becomes this kind of lower dimensional model that the AI has, that it can make predictions about the world. It's almost in a way kind of how humans use mathematics to create a model of the universe and make predictions about what's going to happen. It's this lower dimensional space, and that's kind of what we're doing. And now you think with the AI, that's what it's doing as well. And so you could see it in that lower dimensional space that it has this also model of itself. So it's self-aware. So I don't see why it wouldn't be able to do that personally. But again, I'm not an expert in that area. I want to make that disclaimer.
I think Bill is smiling. Probably you answered his question. I mean, if you want to ask more questions, go for it.
I just don't see a machine thinking for itself. I see a machine copying human thought, imitating human thought from information it collects. But the creation part seems to be a step beyond, in my mind. And that's not because I know anything about AI, because I don't.
Yeah, the creation is depends what we mean by creation, I guess. I think if you play around with these like ChatGPT, you can see that it will reason. So you can begin, for example, with some, and it'll even make proofs. It'll go through, and some of these other ones that you give it an initial assumption, and then it goes through the steps and it will prove until it gets to it's a rational machine, An
example earlier, Sherwin mentioned Ptolemy, and he mentioned him as being wrong, and then Galileo and Copernicus corrected him. But Ptolemy was not wrong. He was very precise and very accurate. His interpretation of what he saw was incorrect, but not his data or his facts. And that's kind of the difference I see between AI and.
Well, I wouldn't even argue that Ptolemy wasn't actually, I mean, from a physics point of view, I can pick any coordinate system I want.
Yes.
If I choose, I can say, let the Earth be the center and everything goes around it. I can make that choice. It makes the math a hell of a lot difficult. I can't the calculations become impossible, really, really difficult. So the key there is that by moving it to the heliocentric is that all of a sudden the mathematics becomes really easy, and you can create these models now. And that's why I argue that I kind of, my own pet theory is that the thrust of human civilization, of thought, of evolution, is this process of mirroring the universe better and better and better, of developing these models which make predictions that beat chance. I think that's the game of evolution, actually, is there are these machines that develop semantic information about the world. And the better it develops that semantic information, the better it's going to survive, and the better it's going to propagate. It makes predictions. It allows it to survive, and allows it to create new order and to structure. I think that's it. It's almost kneaded into the very heart of reality, is this drive to mirror the universe in a way, or I would, if you want to talk mystical, like God.
Going from simple observation to facts. Take Newton. Everybody knew that gravity existed, but only Newton was able to figure out why it did what it did and to make predictions from it. And that was a genuinely creative, monstrously a creative thought that he came up with for something that everybody already knew all along, but except for that creativity part of it.
Yeah, you may be right, but then I think there are some who could argue that I've even read, that if you fed into these AIs enough data, it will deduce, it'll figure out these laws and make these predictions.
That I don't know.
I don't know. I still think that there's some role for this spark of creativity that exists, and I think that I agree with you in spirit that I don't think the AIs, at least as they exist now, will ever be able to do what we're doing. And I don't think, and going on another aspect of this idea of being, right? We all have a sense of being, of I-ness. I mean, okay, there's a self-awareness, but then there's also the sense of being that we're present, that we exist. And we all know it, I'm present, I'm here. I kind of don't think that, I think that's something special, that humans have, and that you're not going to get it. It almost argues in a weird way. This is interesting. Sorry, I'm going to wax here a little bit. There's this really interesting discussion Abdu'l-Baha makes when he talks about another aspect that's unique to human beings, and kind of is an interesting proof of the soul. And he goes like this. He says that in the physical world, basically all forms that exist, in order to change form, they have to be destroyed. So if you have a circle and it wants to become a square, the circle has to be destroyed. That form of the circle has to be destroyed for it to become a square, right? So it has to change form, because in this world of existence, we're composed realities, okay? And so those composed realities will decompose and have to be destroyed. So I'm going to create something new. And that's the rule of this physical universe, that you can't have things changing form. They can change form, but then that old form needs to be cease to exist. This, he says, though, he explains with the human mind, though, and the soul, it's different. We have the capacity of conceiving multiple forms and multiple ideas at the same time. And there's no problem. There's no issue. So while we sit here, I can conceive of both the circle and the square and all these different ideas at the same time. And this is not an issue. And so for him, then he explained, well, this is kind of evidence that the soul is of a different order than the physical world. It doesn't have to be, it's eternal. But what's interesting to me is that example that he used is eerily similar to the idea of quantum mechanics of superposition. where you can actually have these cat-like states where they, based on the kind of the Schrodinger cat kind of thought experiment they thought, where you have things which are completely opposite to each other existing at the same time at a state, and then they don't collapse into one or the other until they're measured. Which again, to me, I would argue, and I argued in this paper I wrote, that basically that's kind of a hint that maybe there's some weird similarity going on between what's happening in our soul, in our eternal, and what we're seeing in this fundamental base reality of the universe. So I don't know. That's just a.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Ranjbar, you have great friends. They join you and then they dispute. This is wonderful. This is a Baha'i
That's the point
relationship.
of friends. That's what you need, friends.
Yes, that's great. Shahla Jun, go for it.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed as much of it as I was able to hear because I had a lot of kids here. We're preparing for a junior youth camp this weekend, and we are getting ready, and we are trying to get them to make sure that they have their toothbrushes and sleeping bags and so forth. So it's been a little bit chaotic. So I didn't get the whole thing, but I got your gist of what you were saying. A couple of things you said caught my attention. You said, what we put into the machine is what we get out. I agree with you. And I think that the progressive revelation, which has become much more clear during this dispensation, makes it very clear to me that the Creator constantly helps us to grow holistically, physically, spiritually, and intellectually. So it gives us specific laws that are universal, and then it gives us some laws that are for that period. And that helps us to grow during that period until we get ready for the next. And I don't agree with you saying things has to die to turn into something else. I don't think a square dies for a circle to be made, evolves into a circle. I believe that, for example, a child evolves into a junior youth. A junior youth evolves into a youth evolves into an adult. As we grow and progress physically, intellectually, and spiritually, we become more and more unique, and then we become more productive. So I think I was looking at a writing of Shoghi Effendi that wrote, let me just read one sentence. Would you mind if I read one sentence?
Please.
From a letter of June 15, 1946. To try to obtain a clear view of the shape of things to come would be premature, inasmuch as the glittering prizes to be won are directly depends on the measure of success which the combined efforts that are now being exerted must yield. And it goes on and on. It's a fantastic letter to read. I think a lot of us don't realize that without Abraham, we could not have had Moses. Without Abraham talking about the one universal creator, without Moses and 10 Commandments, we could not have had Christ. Without the love of God in our heart with Christ, we could not have had Muhammad. And without Muhammad, submission to the will of God, we could not have had Bab and Baha'u'llah to create the unity of this world. I mean, let's face it, at the time of Abraham, we were villages, we were tribes, and we had no knowledge or capacity to see beyond that. As you were just talking about it, when somebody discovered something like the world is not flat and round, people wanted to kill him. When the guy said anyone said, even the creator, I don't know, recently I was thinking, the first guy who flew across the ocean, people said, if God wanted us to fly, he would have given us wings. Flying is for the birds. And now today we can fly anywhere and even to the moon. So I feel that as we grow and develop physically, intellectually, and spiritually, we gain the knowledge to create these machines. And I don't know where these machines are going to go. They maybe go, I don't know. It depends on what we do and how we develop and how we create. So I don't know what you think of that. I feel that we could go anywhere if we, as Shuggie Effendi said, work together for the benefit of humanity and create a world that we can live together in unity. So I don't know what you think about those possibilities, because machines, I think, can go beyond even our imaginations, even that we can imagine today in the future.
Well, I guess I believe at the end of the day that all these forces that were unleashed, and we believe, I think as Baha'is, that all this technology, that, you know, it's interesting for anyone in history, you know, to look at what happened in the middle of the 19th century, that it's unmistakable that something happened. It's like a huge phase transition happened, and it rocked the whole world. It's really, it can be rightly said to be the single greatest event that the planet really has ever seen. And we believe as Baha'is that the forces that were unleashed then, that we see manifesting themselves now in terms of technological, social, and all these different changes in the world, are come in their source from the divine revelation that was unleashed on humankind at that time. And, you know, Baha'u'llah basically says as much. He says, well, with the revealing of these verses, that technology and the doors of arts and sciences are going to be open. So I believe that all of these things, you know, have potential for benefit to us, but there's also potential for harm. You know, as there's an interesting, you're probably aware of, many Baha'is are, and many who aren't Baha'is may not know that there's some interesting, quite prescient statements of Abdul Baha back in the 1912 or so in Paris, when he's talking to the Japanese ambassador and basically warning him about what appears to be the discovery of nuclear technology, and saying there's this potential force present in humanity that is capable of just killing everyone on the planet. You know, I'm paraphrasing here, but that's the, if you read it, it's stunning that he's saying this. And he's saying he beseeches God that we do not discover this before we have the spiritual capacity, maturity for it, because in the hands of people of lower nature, it'll lead to devastation. So I guess that there is both this capacity for amazing progress, and it's for our benefit. But then there's also a word of caution, and that's not the only place that Baha'u'llah warns us. He says, you know, that science and technology can be you know, that's a source of danger as well. You know, the civilization can overstep the bounds of moderation, and
we know that because we some of us maybe were there, or just children, that Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and the bomb Americans dropped on Japan. So we have some idea of the devastating result of technology if it is used for the negative. But of course, it has also been used for the positive.
yeah.
So I think this is the idea of the holistic being, which is growing equally, physically, spiritually, and intellectually, is that that gives us the positive thoughts that creates the positivity. At least that's what I think.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Allah. Farideh, go for it. We usually finish by 8:30, a little long, then we have a devotional till 9. So if there is not any more questions after Farideh Khanum, we might change to a devotional. Now, okay, Mr. Tarzan, okay. So there are questions after questions. Go ahead, Farideh Khanum, please.
Dr. Ranjbar, really, I enjoy it so much. I hear so many scholars come to Chicago talk. Your talking was is really touched my heart. I have one question and also one suggestion. When you're going to come to Chicago and inform me, Furuzan John knows my telephone, maybe we can arrange some talk to you in the Baha'i House of Worship. That is the suggestion. And my question also is that, I want to ask this scientifically, because so many visitors come to the temple, even Christian or Muslim, they are saying the end of the world is coming. And world situation is so bad. As a Baha'i, we know that beloved guardian explained the promise they come and Seattle of the faith. What is your see it? What is your feeling? What is your, I think, any moment something happening on the earth. What is your opinion? Thank you so much.
Oh, so you want me to see what may happen? I don't know. I'm as uncertain as I think everyone here. I can't predict where we're headed. All that I know is what we are promised, and I cling to that. That through these trials that we're going to go through, that the most great peace will come, and that humanity will weather this storm. But we have our work cut out for us, I think, as Baha'is. We have to teach and build the communities, really. I think that's because we're having this society being torn apart by all these forces that have been unleashed. It's really ripping at the fabric of our community and polarizing people and making people hate each other for ridiculous reasons. And we need to be the agents of building and uniting people and healing those bonds.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ranjbar. Mr. Taherzadeh, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. Dr. Ranjbar, this presentation really helped me put things together, meaning connect things. So I feel was very helpful. And some of the things that coalesced as a result of your presentation are the statements in their writings where there's reference to other creatures in other worlds, or other worlds, many of them having creatures. And now, this has always been a puzzle, especially the word as translated by the beloved guardian, Shaykh Effendi, the choice of the word creatures instead of some other human type description. But the thing that helped me coalesce this is, at the end, I was thinking, I was arriving at something in the writings that you also tried to reference in that Abdul Baha talking of the material world, and especially the human material body, and referring to death, he said, as you referenced, that the human body is a composition, basically a composition of different elements, and anything that is composed is destined to become decomposed. However, he says, the soul is not a composition; it's of a single substance, and that's what makes it eternal. So that's a key concept, that the soul is of a single substance. It's not how do you say it in English? It's not subject to decomposition. That's what makes it eternal. Now, the thing about creatures and the soul and AI and possible connection, it seems to me that what helped me is that the soul is as you mentioned, is a rational being, it's a rational entity. So whatever, when the soul, and the other thing was the Abdul Baha's mention of the natural order. Now, there's a very, there is something embedded in this term, natural order, that escapes us, I think, because of our familiarity with the words natural. And order is order, and the natural for us is so common. But I think what he's saying is this natural, when he says natural, that refers to God's intervention. That is what's natural. And as Abdul Baha and you mentioned, whatever is made according to the natural order, that can create life. But everything else are these random compositions and all that are not of the natural order. These, you can never get life out of them. So this word natural, I think, refers to the intervention, divine intervention. That's a mystery. Now, so the connection between this natural order and the soul, what I'm trying to get at is that, let's say the fetus is of a natural order. That's why the soul attaches, becomes related to the fetus in the first place at conception, because the fetus is of a natural order. By that I mean it's a divine creation. Now, this fetus, of course, grows and so on, and the soul is related to it. But this body, this human physical existence, by developing these capacities, it affects the soul, meaning it has a capacity, there's an interaction. When you talked about the womb world and developing capacity, I feel it's this material body has a capacity to interact and affect the growth of the soul in a spiritual manner. Now, about creatures, I'm getting to something here, is that the creatures in other worlds, they may be of other compositions, other chemistries, but if they are of such a natural order that they can affect the soul or attract the soul and have the soul associated with those structures and those natural orders, then yes, those would be rational creatures. Those would be creatures that would be rational creatures, because the soul, the soul can become associated with those structures. So yes, those will be creatures, and they maybe look quite differently from different chemistries. But if they have the capacity to attract the soul, which is this single substance, then yes, they will be rational creatures also. Anyway, it's hard to be precise, but I tried what I could at impromptu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. I mean, my thoughts is that the soul is kind of like it's interesting. There's this old ancient polymath, Jabir, who Baha'u'llah actually quotes sometimes in his writing. He's a famous Persian alchemist. He became, Gerber's, and if you read some of his writing, a lot of it is kind of nonsensical from a Western point of view, and kind of a modern science point of view. But there's some interesting thoughts. But one of the things I came away with, he talks about how the soul is like a mathematical entity. It's like a musical note almost. So I think the idea of resonance maybe is there, and at least it's my own pet thought that somehow when you say it attracts it, it basically means that the configuration is such that it resonates at that right. So the universe, is made up of composed things, right? But at the substance level, we're made up of these atoms, or actually we believe not atoms, even these subatomic particles, which are really modern day atoms. The atom was a Greek word for something that was indivisible. So we think that there's these subatomic particles that can't be divided anymore, like an electron, like a quark. And these are these fundamental particles. And that's actually what Abdu'l-Baha likened to the human soul, and said just like the human soul can't decay because it's not composed, also these fundamental particles, or he made an analogy to them. But I think that analogy goes even kind of further, is that they're really quite similar, that there's quite this profound similarity between these, because I think they both represent ultimately a type of Platonic form that exists in the Platonic realm, that they are kind of a mathematical structure. So when you ask yourself, what is an electron, right? Well, what you say is you can define it very exactly through its relationships, through its mathematical relationships. So you describe its spin, its mass, and its charge. But all those factors really represent relationships with other things. And so it boils down to these mathematical relationships which define it and make it existent. And so that electronness can exist anywhere where you have those same type of relationships existing. And almost it does what we think of as matter, or the substrate, almost is not important. What matters are those relationships, those mathematical structures. And so maybe the soul in a way is kind of like that. And it's this relationship with the divine, that gets set up. But these are just my own speculations, and I think people are getting tired.
Shervin, I know that you have a question. Barbara is shaking her hand. Barbara wrote for you, Dr. Ranjbar, something interesting. Thank you, Dr. Ranjbar. I heard things I never expected to, and of all things, I very much enjoyed it, all of it. Shervin, I'm conflicted because I know that you might be able to continue with Dr. Ranjbar for the next 2 years. We need to have prayers because people are here and we want to make sure we have devotionals. And I have a question myself. I sacrifice my question and ask you to go ahead if you promise to be very, very short. And please come back next Thursday. Go ahead.
I don't promise anything, but I don't want you to sacrifice your question, so I bypass. Please go ahead.
No, as a Baha'i, I have to ask you to go forward. I can't.
As a Baha'i, I have to do the same, so we're even.
Enough of the taro.
Okay, well, Dr. Ranjbar will be here for a few more. So, Dr. Ranjbar, everything is okay. Can I ask a question? And Shervin it. Okay. My question is, you said brain is the mirror of the soul. And I'm wondering if you can kindly give an explanation of the brain, mind, and the soul. Go for it.
Oh God, I think it's probably not my purview to make that explanation. I think we can appeal to Abdu'l-Baha's writings actually directly on this subject. I was quoting earlier from in the talk. Let me see if I can find that. Oh, there it was. Okay, here it goes. As for the mind, it is the power of the human spirit. The spirit is as the lamp, and the mind is as the light that shines from it. The spirit is as the tree, and the mind is the fruit. So the mind is the perfection of the spirit and the necessary attribute thereof, even as the rays of the sun are an essential requirement of the sun itself. Now, okay, that's mind. I'm equating that with the brain, but maybe it's not equivalent. There's probably not. It's an abstraction, probably beyond that. I'm sure.
Thank you. Since you're going to come back very soon, I'll cut it off here. Now, Sherwin, go for it.
Yeah. Yes.
Mind has a tashachus, a personality of its own. A spirit at its higher realm, Holy Spirit, does not have tashachus, does not have personality. That's an emanation from God, and it first finds its first tashachus or characteristic in the manifestation. My point was with regard to Dr. Vahid Ranjbar. Thank you again very much for the wonderful talk. But him and another friend agreed that Connolly was not necessarily wrong. It was just a matter of choosing an inertial frame of reference, if I understand it correctly. And I think in the realm of kinematics, he would probably be able to get somewhere. But when it comes to kinetics, the assertions of Ptolemy fall flat on its face, where when it comes to explaining simple things like the Coriolis effect in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, the assertions of Ptolemy fall flat on its face. And I mean, I understand that the assertion of Ptolemy is completely wrong. It's not just about the frame of reference, choice of frame of reference. It falls into serious contradictions, Coriolis effects being one of them. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I would just, I mean, the Coriolis, this all follows from Newton. And so Newton is, and Newton's laws, F equals ma and these different things that ultimately they're rooted in that. And so he didn't know about that. So I would say if you really wanted to, you could imagine a system where you would include that. It would be a mess, but you would account for that as well. I can pick my point was I could pick. The choosing of a coordinate system is arbitrary. You can pick whatever you want. It's better to pick one that's kind of an inertially stable one because it makes the mathematics easier, and that's why picking the solar one is better. Yeah, anyways.